for the Arts Virtual Artist Talk. We are going to talk about the current exhibits at the Paradise Center for the Arts, which we have Ivan Willock, Marv Kaisersaat, Chris Willock, Autumn Caroline, Shelley Caldwell, and Bethlehem Academy. For those of you who aren't familiar with the Paradise Center for the Arts, we are a multidisciplinary art center in historic downtown Faribault. We have 4 on-site galleries, 1 off-site gallery, our 278-seat auditorium, our classrooms, and we have so much to offer. So please find us on the web at paradisecenterforthearts.org. We will be recording this artist talk for people who can't be with us today. We'll put it on our YouTube page, social media, and website. And first, we're going to talk about the artists in the Carlander Gallery, which are the wood carvers from Faribault. Faribault is extremely lucky to have 3 very talented wood carvers, Ivan, Marv, and Chris. You can see there's a photo here of their work in the Carlander Gallery. Looks like we have somebody joining us. Welcome, Krista. And let's see, let's go. Here's another shot of the gallery. And we have 3 artists, and they both have very distinct styles. And first, we'll look at Ivan. Ivan did give me some notes. He was not able to be here tonight, but this is his piece, Too Pretty to Play. And this is a rather large piece on the back wall. And some of these photos I took, so they aren't the best representation. If you can, I would highly recommend seeing the exhibits in person. And if you can't get to the Paradise during our open hours, please call or email me. And you can find that information on the website. And we can actually set up a personal showing for you. And I know we started that during COVID because some people aren't comfortable being in public space with others, and we can still do that accommodation. So give us a call or an email and we can set up an appointment to give you a private showing. So Ivan said Too Pretty to Play is based on an incident at a family gathering. The little girl leaning against a tree had her nice dress on and didn't want it to get dirty. So she stayed back while the other children played. Her body language and expression tell us that she'd really rather been playing with the other children. I had that problem when I was a child, so I very understand her predicament. And this one is Ralph. Ralph was carved out of basswood. The intention is to explore informal balance when the figure is relaxed, the weight is shifted, the torso twisted, and the model was a student in one of his carving workshops. And Ivan has a mix of relief sculptures and then the 3D standing sculptures. This one is Eve. Eve is carved also out of basswood. It is one of his stylized pieces where he is using exaggeration to bring out specific characteristics. The goal is to create strong, expressive forms. He's more concerned with mass than line in this piece. I love her eyes. This one is He's Late. To me, I could see she's impatiently waiting. Ivan said He's Late is a large freestanding relief. The intent is to emphasize the illusion of depth with angles and the lines in perspective. He also used overlapping forms and contrasting textures to add to the illusion. And she's rather large, like the first piece, Too Pretty to Play. They're rather large pieces. Then this one is quite different. A Cabin in the Woods. He uses a combination of techniques here. actual depth through layering, and optical depth through vanishing points. He also uses a variety of textures to create contrast. And he did this carving as a demonstration of techniques that he discussed in his books, Pictorial Relief. And Ivan does have a website, and you can find a lot of information on his website and images. And he has a couple books he's written that I'm not sure if you can still get them or not. I would have to double check on that. But the artist statement I found on his website says Ivan Willock did his first wood carving at the age of 12 in his father's furniture shop. He received his art degree in 1959 and studied with sculptors Angel, I'm sorry if I'm not saying this right, Lilo, and master carver
Lilo.
Yeah. And then master carver Eduardo, maybe you can help me with this one too.
Gutierrez.
Yep.
Gutierrez.
Yep. Ivan's wood sculptures, bronze statues, and reliefs can be found in churches, businesses, and private collections around the world. And Marv, is my understanding that you learned from Ivan? Is that where you started wood carving?
Yeah, I took a class. One of the teachers said, "Oh, why don't you take a class with Ivan?" And that was in the security building downstairs. Take the rickety elevator down there, and started with learning how to sharpen tools by hand, not by machines or anything like that. And I can't remember what the year was. It was probably in the 70s someplace.
Wow.
But anyway, that's the start. So I did carve, I didn't do caricatures at the time. I was just doing carving, at the time, just regular basic relief carving and things like that. Yeah, this is a picture I see up there. One of the things I try to do is wherever there's grain going across, or he's got that some kind of pry bar, but things are banked, they're put up against another piece so it doesn't break with the cross grain. So I try to get the cross grain so that it touches something else instead of just having a crowbar there with nothing touching it. That'd be pretty weak for a crowbar. So you see that board coming down and it's touching the crowbar, and it strengthens it a little bit at that point. But there's people like this one because they experienced a lot of this stuff. Like the motor down there, and the belt comes off the motor, and the boards are wet, so they twist and try to split up, try to wedge. He's pounding a wedge on there so separate the board. So a lot of the stuff that I started with, this is quite a ways along, but the big projects I took usually by something that I probably did in the summer. I worked construction in the summers. So I have done things like jamming up the saw like he did there. So everything's been pretty much at that time for things I've done in the summer. I don't know, that's about it on that one, I think. Well, I should, oh yeah, this is fairly recent. I was inspired by cats in Dr. Seuss. So I had the cats distracting the butcher, and he's holding looks like some kind of chunk of meat there. So he's distracted, and I call it teamwork because this one on the right, on my right, is standing on another dog, and he's the one that's going to grab the piece of meat. So usually on something like these are fairly complicated carvings. I try to get some kind of story going in there, and I try to get some humor in it someplace. So if I don't carve it, if I don't have any humor in the carving, I don't get too fired up on it. So I try to get a little bit of humor in there. It might not be obvious at first, but if you look around a little bit, you see things, oh, that's, my dog does that. Yeah, sure. Anyway, that's the teamwork guy.
And Mars,
Art?
oops, sorry. Whoa, I was going on with my voice. Somebody was asking me today, are these out of one piece of wood or are these multiple pieces of wood?
No, that's kind of my specialty when I'm doing a large piece. I could consider this a large piece. It's probably about a foot across. But if you can see, there's a couple lines there going through the M and the W. And that's a piece of wood that's been glued together. The joint hasn't been the best joint. So I try to get chunks of wood off the same plank so that I get basically the same color. But it's all glued up into one chunk. So when I bandsaw around the outside of that, it comes out looking at it. And I teach classes, and they come up with something like this. I say, I'm glad I don't have to teach it or carve it rather. So yeah, it's a one piece, but it's glued up. It's not one piece without any glue in it.
Wow.
I should mention something on these carvings, these bigger ones. I do the clay model. Just the clay that's, so it's, I don't know what kind of,
Like a plasticine? or
yeah, it's
something?
like a plasticine, right? So you can use the clay over and over. So what I do is I set up a armature, a wire skeleton, the way I want things to look. And then I just start adding clay, not a lot of detail on the clay. I just keep adding clay and then stop and let it sit for a while. And the reason for the clay is I can figure out if I've got the tools to cut into different places. So I kind of arrange things so I can get my tools, my carving tools into certain spots. Sometimes they don't get into a certain spot. And you got to make a special tool then. So you just bend up some pipes and put some blades in there and work it. Usually it works out pretty good though. So the clay model is plasticine, use over and over. I hate to use them again because I spend a lot of time on the clay part, but it gathers a lot of moss on it. It's just terrible.
Dust.
So usually I toss them. Anyway, that's the teamwork guy. I don't know what other, oh, that one, I kind of like that one. The guy's, he's barefooted there and he's got his cue there, this, what do they call them? Cues, I guess they call them. And he's using his toe there as a rest. So he got the tube coming or the cue coming between his toes, hitting at the ball. And the guy on the left there, he's saying, wait a minute, that's not legal. That's not in the rule book. But the title for this one, I think, was something about rule. Oh yeah, rule 9.14 says, you know, he's pointing out the rule that he's not doing the right thing. You can't put your foot up there like that and stick a cute between the toes. And but that one had a lot of, I did a lot of research on what pool tables look like, and I got a bug flying. Oh, that was a cat.
Is that Panda?
That's
Yes, it
bad.
is.
So as you can see, it's a totally different carving than what Ivan does. Ivan does, you know, commissions for churches and all kinds of people. And mine, I just try to make them so there's something humorous about it. So if I don't get anything that when I'm doing a clay and it's not funny for me, I probably change it. So that one, I kind of like that one. Researching the different type of pool tables and stuff. So you can see that leg on that guy's coming around and they're meeting nose to nose right underneath that middle pocket.
Hmm.
So I don't use, exactly what a pool table looks like, but I take the main things out of the pool table.
I just noticed that there's a pool cue holder underneath the table
Yeah, that's
that he could have used.
yeah, that's a I think they call it a rack or something where they use the
I
cue
can't
and
think
they
what it's
push
called.
it. Yeah, so there is one. There might be a couple there. I don't know. There is one for sure. I know that's a rack. So instead of using his toe, he could have used that thing. But
Oh, there's one up there and one down there.
oh yeah, okay. But the thing is, it didn't start like this when I started carving. I started carving on. I was a teacher and we had a strike in 1970. I think it was about 1970. So I started doing jigsaw puzzles. I got tired of that. It went on for a while. So went to a library and got a little book out of the library on carving caricatures. And the cover was kind of ripped and all that. But that was my first book as far as carving. And the funny thing about it, for me at least, is many years later, that book was on the discard pile and I bought it for 10 cents. So anyway, that's rule 9.14. Well, my first carving, I'm going to go back. Well, that's okay, leave that. I want to tell you about my first carving that I did. It was just after I had that book and I made a little, I like baseballs. I made a baseball pitcher. And it was just out of a piece of pine wood, like 3/4 inch thick and maybe about 4 inches high. And I was so proud of that thing. It was in the wintertime. And I put in my jacket and I walk up and down Central Avenue. Anybody that I saw that I kind of knew, I showed up this beautiful carving. So that way, that was my first carving, so I was pretty proud of it. This one is on, oh, he's a peripatetic cowbird. So you see up at the top there, they're finishing up the carving or the birdhouse. And there's a bird there that comes in and it's carrying a suitcase that has all kinds of little labels on it, carved on different. So peripatetic, people ask me, some people ask me, what is this peripatetic thing? Well, it's a person that goes from place to place, it just keeps moving. And this is that bird. He's just come in and he wants to get into his little house up there. He's got his little suitcase and these guys are working to get that thing done. One guy's pointing at the bird and say, hey, we got to hurry. We got to get going here. He wants to get in. The painter on the left there. A lot of times I use a left-hander for doing pounding nails or in this case, painting. But what I do is I use a mirror and I hold a mirror up and it shows me what I want to carve. It's in reverse. So that's why my guys are left-handed. So I might make a model like if I didn't know how to hold a hammer, I hold it in my hand and put the mirror on it and it would reflect it opposite. So that's what the lefty is up there. And let's see, oh, the guy down below, he's just kind of pulling that house into, there's a little hole there. He's trying to slip it into that hole. And let's see, what else is on? Oh, that guy that's standing on, I don't know what, he's standing on the painter, he's got his foot on there. But then I had a figure on top that was, he's kind of like pretending that he's being hurt by this person standing on his foot. So that one was fairly complicated. It was never entered in a show. And everything is pretty well braced up, so it's not always breakable. So anyway, That's, that one, I think I just called it, oh yeah, that was a peripatetic culvert. Okay, any others? Oh, wow, yeah. This is Sherlock Holmes with his dog. And he's got this guy trapped down below. He's hanging in the sewer and he's holding a flashlight, I think it is, and he's got jewels there and all that. And this Sherlock is just kind of taking it easy, and the dog is, they know they got him trapped underground. I don't know if I don't always put a title on him, and I don't always put a name underneath, and I get called for that a lot because they say, oh, you should put the date and you should put your name underneath, carve the name, but I figure at this point they can probably recognize most of my carvings. So that's Sherlock, I guess. Okay, any others in there?
Let me go forward. I think that's it, but yep. Somebody today was mesmerized by the chain, that you could carve that
Oh,
chain
yeah.
out.
Yeah, it's all part of the wood. Actually, you can mail, some carvers, just to pass the time, they make chains. They can make chains by laying them out. There's a certain way of laying them out and coming up with a chain in one piece. So a lot of times I use a lot of times I use parts or references from other carvings. So instead of doing the wheel again, I look at the carving that I might have carved something on and kind of use it. Now this one, I don't think it's all pretty much new things that I did.
I think the women who are asking me a bunch of questions today were teachers, and they taught with you when you were teaching.
Yeah, well, one of the things I get hit with is, why don't you sell any of your stuff?
I get that question, yeah.
That's course. But I did sell a couple way back when I first started. I thought I was pretty good, so I did make some. And the thing that put me off against carving for sale was the person asked me to carve a golfer, I think. It doesn't matter what it was, something. I'll use a golfer. And they said, well, my grandson, and I'm making this up, but it's basically the same story. My grandson is a golfer and he would like a carving. And he said, you see, she said something about his face. And I like to get his face on there so it kind of looks like him. And I said, well, I don't do caricatures with faces and likenesses and things like that, because that's a totally different ballgame. So I said, well, I'm going to carve it as well as I can. There won't be a likeness. So I did that. I guess they were happy with the carving. They paid for it. And that was the last carving I did that tried to look like somebody. So that's why one of the reasons I stopped trying to sell carvings. Now, if they have one in a display, I guess they could pick that up. But anyway, that's the one on Sherlock.
Well, thank you for sharing your work with us, and people are just literally mesmerized by your pieces. They can't believe the creativity, the technical aspect, and the humor.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. And again, please come and see these in person. They're so impressive. Thank you, Marv.
Yeah, thanks,
Yeah.
Marv. I went to high school in Blue Earth, so when I saw Bruce Ankeny at the opening, he just said, oh yeah, Marv is my hero. So it was nice to have that crossover there. So I see your style coming through in what I've seen out of him as well. Definitely. Good teacher.
Yeah, Bruce is a good guy.
Bruce Ankeny, yeah.
Yeah. I'm sitting in his recliner as we speak.
So Marv, do you teach?
I did teach at Willox Studio for about 10 or so years. but no, I don't. But it was nice because most of the people paid long distances to come teach or to learn from me. So that was kind of fun. So I picked up a few friends along the way. And I think most of the people enjoyed the class. It was pretty much an extension of my algebra classes, the same basic techniques as far as telling them how to get at different parts of the puzzle. So, and that's my last teaching, Ivan's class in the summers. I usually did classes, 2 or 3 classes at the start, and then at the end we're doing probably 1. So right now there's a lot of instructors out there for teaching carving, but it's a little different style than what I do. So the ones that came from out of town were usually interested in design, some design elements in the carving and some humor in the carving. Maybe not as complicated as the ones I had, but they had an idea and I think most of them were fired up on it. So.
Well, thank you. And the third person in this exhibition is Ivan's son, Chris Willock. And Chris Willock has several wood spirits in this show. This is his largest piece in the show. And if you're interested, Chris's pieces are actually selling rather fast. So if you're interested, come in and buy a piece and support the artist. Chris Willock is the son of Ivan Willock. Chris is the executive director of Northfield Enterprise Center, owner of CJW Sales, and owner of the Whittling Shack. And I believe Chris is off to a wood carving conference right now. Is why we don't have him with us. I know he has been traveling a lot, doing a lot of wood carving conferences around the US. And then he has some smaller pieces like this one. And they are all have very different, distinct faces. And some of his have paint on them. I think Ivan has one piece with paint on it or stain, but most of the pieces in the show don't have any paint or stain on them. And we have Autumn Caroline in our Lois Vranish Boardroom Gallery. Autumn Caroline has photography from around the world, and I will read her artist statement. Autumn Caroline is a freelance travel writer and photographer based in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Being a previous flight attendant, she's traveled to 30 countries, 48 states, and 5 continents. She's received her bachelor's in English literature with an emphasis on creative writing. During her last semester, she was given the opportunity to live in England while studying for her creative writing specialization. During this time, she learned how to travel abroad by herself and spent weekends traveling to 13 different countries all throughout Europe. She brought only a backpack, Nikon camera, and explored this beautiful world with her with wide eyes. After completing her bachelor's, she received an opportunity to be a flight attendant. She was able to combine her busy life of flying and blogging on the side, all while having her beloved camera attached to her hip throughout all of her adventures. She enjoyed flying, but also wanted to explore other travel opportunities, which brought her to becoming a travel agent as well as a travel design manager. Her experiences have brought her to many different places in life, but her one true love has always been a travel photographer. And she has photos from several different countries in this exhibition. This one is from Alaska. Of course, you know, the moose is always not, you know, with Alaska.
Those teeny little antlers.
This one's Netherlands. Netherlands are famous for their bicycles. And I took these photos of framed pieces with glass, so I'm sorry for the reflection. This one's Iceland. Japan. Of course, Paris, France. Famous Eiffel Tower. And now we have Shelley Caldwell, and Shelley is with us. Shelley, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for putting this on, Julie. It's a nice opportunity. I have a variety of things in the gallery where my work is exhibited. It's mainly a large-scale site-specific installation, but I also have some of my 2D works on paper represented, because to me, all my work is like rather cyclical. I like to work on different things and different iterations of things, but there's a lot of formal qualities that tend to cross over between my work. Line really heavily hit is always a part of my work, or there's usually a balance between representation and abstraction in my work. I do enjoy working with skill-based things because a lot of my younger years were full of more technical and traditional training, which I still very much love. But of course, going through the BFA and MA programs at MSU and Mankato will help me expand those things into the creative realm even more so. So over the years, I've done a lot of different work, but over the past several, I am most known for doing work about plants. So these two-dimensional works that are represented are part of one series that's basically an ongoing study of naturally occurring flora. So I'm usually not looking for flowers or things that we already make a lot of work of, or you see a lot of photos taken of, or the things we might clip and put in our vases. The idea really started with having moved back home onto what used to be my grandparents' farm and kind of our hub of operations when I was growing up, and to notice all these beautiful plants growing in all the cracks in the barnyard floor. Most of them, of course, not put there on purpose by a human. But the more I researched the plants and thought they were pretty in their own right with their own natural blooms, a lot of them were things that growing up were called weeds or nuisances. But the more I researched them, they're actually quite often native plants or species that have become naturalized in our area as well. So that was the first series of those works I did, and I believe that was in maybe 2017 that I completed the first small series of those from just plants I found on the farm. And that was right around the time I finished my undergrad at MSU, so I was starting to focus in on something to focus on during their graduate program and beyond. So I continued to do like a small series of these works every year. And then in 2019, I was done with school and I applied for and earned a residency at the Tofty Lake Center, which is just outside Ely, Minnesota. And it was a good opportunity to just relax and enjoy that landscape. But in my mind, it was also a good opportunity to kind of compare and contrast those smaller undergrowth overlooked plants that are actual size in my work as well. So the works here are like 16 by 20s. So one's a goldenrod, one is a carex or a type of sedge grass, and the other one I believe is a primrose species. So I went into the residency thinking that I was going to find a lot of different species from far north to far southern Minnesota, but for the most part, the specimens were pretty homogeneous. So I went into it with that research aspect as well, especially once you're done with school and pursuing art professionally, you got to focus in on those ideas and have a solid base of how to expand it and make it relevant for people. So growing up on a farm and being somebody really interested in the natural world, it just seemed like a really logical connection to continue to pursue because I find it fulfilling, and then it's educational to some extent as well. So these diverge from that educational part in their finished state because I am collecting these specimens when I'm making a series and bringing them into the studio and casting one really bright light onto them to capture their silhouette. And then I mask that off with a masking agent so that I can retain that whiteness of the paper while I splash all the color around in the background. And for me, that's kind of the counterpoint. It makes them more abstract. It makes their environment a lot more ambiguous, and it becomes a little bit more about maybe the feeling or the energy or just what colors I wanted to put on the page. But because I'm going through that process of actually collecting them at certain times of the year, there's usually a lot of memory or experience in my mind with it. So that often has to do a lot with the color choices. It's not necessarily specific to the plant in any one work, more so about my experience or what I want to show about my experience with those plants. So these three are simply that process of capturing the silhouette, masking it off, adding the wet work in the background, which I do with India ink, usually in a few different sessions, letting it dry in between. And then once I'm happy with that background, you can just peel that masking agent right off. It's a lot like rubber cement. So it's somewhat tacky, but it rolls right off the page once it's completely dried after all the wet work. So then I usually just go back in and add sort of a drop shadow effect to one side of the plant. And that usually has to do with whatever I feel like the drawing needs formally, rather than what might be atmospherically correct. So it gives it the illusion of them popping off the page or being a multi-layered work when it's actually just one page with that certain set of processes executed in that order. And the bulk of my work in the gallery is this iteration of my installation practice. And installation is part of the studios represented at MSU in Mankato. It became a new focused discipline when I was finishing undergrad, and it was introduced by the person who was also my drawing instructor. So it was sort of a natural extension of some of the more experimental drawing work I was doing at the time. So installations are usually a little bit hard to pin down as a discipline because they're not material specific. They're not process specific. Installation work is usually characterized by basically three main components. The first being that it's site specific. So even if you're seeing the same work made of the same components, most often if somebody's calling it an installation or themselves an installation artist, they're somehow specifically responding to the environment in which the work is situated. So while I've used most of these components in some form in the past, I really designed this work around some of the architectural features offered in this particular gallery. But then part of installation is also that it does happen while you're installing it. It's not like the work is completed in my studio and I know exactly how it looks and then I go regurgitate it in the gallery. It's more of a process of knowing generally what I'm going for and setting a few basic rules about laying things out to give myself a starting point, but then responding to the process of installing and giving the work what it needs. So I know Tammy and Julie experienced that at the beginning of my second day because I knew I could do part of what I did on day one better, or I could make a change that would require me to do some more work. But it was necessary to get to this end result that I was happier with. So it's very much a process of responding to the actual act of installing the work. The other major aspects of installation art is that you're usually using some, if not quite a bit of materials that aren't traditionally thought of as art making materials. So in this one, yes, there's drawing paper, but we have live plants and thread and retail racking and legal pad paper. So a lot of materials that are common. And the other reason for that is because it helps to start to recontextualize things from the way we experience them on any given day. So I'll often use a lot of domestic things, a lot of office items, things that any average person can come in, and if they look closely, they can identify and relate to the materials I'm using. I'm just using them in a much different context. And then lastly, the main thing about installation art is that you really kind of come at it more as an experience for the audience as well. So rather than it just being, you know, a two-dimensional drawing on the wall, that it is an object and you are the viewer and that's the extent of your interaction. I and most installation artists are seeking to, you know, create more of an experiential aspect to the work, so you can actually walk around it, somewhat like certain sculpture. You can get in the work to a certain degree. You can interact with the work. In this case, the plants are up for adoption at the end of the show. So there's that power of choice and interaction afforded to the audience to make it more experiential in that way. And not always, but often with my work as well, there is the appeal to other senses for the audience as well. So I left the real water, running water aspect out of this one for the sake of a carpeted gallery, but I'll often use like a small submersible pump and to hide that in the corner of a gallery somewhere so that there's the sound of running water. Sometimes the air or the heat kicks on and all those hanging elements will start to shake and move with the breeze. And other times I've used fans and things like that. Quite often with my installation work, it is pretty heavily plants these days, but there's also often a smell involved. So it is more subtle and like pleasant with this work because there is that soil smell when you're closer. If a gallery goer happens to experience the work on a day right after somebody watered the plants, there is that sort of actual smell sense that's also being appealed to. So those sort of, I guess we'll call them tenets of installation art, guide my thinking and my choices about the way I go into an installation. So for this particular work, I decided to call it Coalescence just because it is a, you know, sort of a merger of all these things, which my installation art always is, but this one more so than ever because it's the first time I actually didn't make one brand new component for the work. I do usually recycle a lot of old components and rework them to fit the space I'm making a piece for. But with this, and I did that with this one, but I'll usually add one new element. So here it was really pushing myself to rethink some old components and to throw certain ones out of the mix that I've been using recently to bring some really old ones back into the mix, like those larger cut paper silhouette shadows of the spider plants haven't maybe made an appearance for quite a few years now, but they were taking up too much space in my studio for storage anyway, so I was ready to cut them up and try something new and basically let them go so that they could become those square panels that are hung throughout the gallery that reflect those 4 square window panels above the window facing the street, or to reflect, you know, that drop ceiling that we are all very familiar with in interior spaces. So there's a lot of very basic formal cues that I'll take from a space and then decide to restructure my components around that. And it's like anything, like all art, seeing it in person is always the best experience because you can really get up close and examine things and move through the work in your own way and to take your own understanding away from it. Like there's a lot of really fine thread lines that'll catch the light at different times of day in this one, as well as those panels, those square panels that have the cut paper pieces and some scraps in them, they're hung in a much less secure way than I'm used to securing my work. And they really are just hung from one center point so that many of them can spin and move and change as people pass through the gallery or drafts flow through the space. And as I mentioned, the plants are very much up for adoption at the end of the show. I do always try to make my installations interactive in that way, because I am just a plant person in general. And at a certain point, you have to, we'll say, share the wealth, but also lighten my load a little bit and get those plants out into other homes rather than me having to always repot them and size them up or decide if I'm tossing them out or not after a certain amount of time. And I also do think of it as a very backwards way of marketing myself, because I also do make two-dimensional work or other types of work. Giving plants away is usually planting a good experience in people's everyday lives or their weekly watering or whatever their experience is with the plant they chose to adopt. It's like a very low pressure pet. You get to take this thing and nurture it and interact with it, and it gives you fresh air in return for just a very simple demand of getting some water. And it does help me then continue to make this work so that it is feasible now that I am just in a home studio and not like on a university campus where you have a lot of space anymore. So it literally plants me into people's everyday lives so that maybe when they are, looking to support some artists or buy some other types of artwork, they can go to my website and revisit my two-dimensional work or reach out to me and see what I might be currently offering or up to. So the last week of the show, for this one, gallery goers are welcome to come on in and take home a plant. So I have that much less to put in my vehicle on my trip home from deinstalling. And this image, I'm glad that Julie chose this one. Actually, I have a soft spot for this work. It's not a color palette that I normally choose, but I think that's why it came out in a way that I was really happy with. It's the same process as what I had mentioned on the first slide with the first three works. It is also that same like 16 by 20 size. This one is I believe a northern bush honeysuckle. And it was kind of a windier day and like leaves and little flower petals were blowing off of it. So, and quite a few of the 16 by 20 works in this show, there's that little collage element as well of those black paper scraps. Sometimes the process I outlined before still isn't quite enough and it needs that one little extra element. So for me in a few of these, it was adding a collage bit, and the black paper scraps just made sense to me. One, because I had them and I like to be resourceful with what I already have in the so-called waste I've already made. And there again, that even though it's not black line in this case, the really graphic nature and that sort of small scale of these particular scraps reflect a lot of the small details that I'll add as finishing touches in my drawings. And usually it adds a little bit more movement to the piece and one additional layer to really help push the foreground and middle ground and those spatial illusions that are created by the process I use. And I think that's the last one that we have.
I think so too. And people are really excited to see the installation. I think we've only had one other installation type exhibit, but this is by far the first major installation we've had, and people cannot believe how you transform the space.
Oh, and I'm glad you mentioned that, Julie. That is really, kind of the main aim, I think, for most installation artists as well, is to not just create an experience, but to transform the space in a way that it's like the work and the space just were meant to go together. And I often come at it with most spaces I exhibit installations in, the people that see them are people that frequent those spaces or have been there before. So I do really try to keep in mind how I can create a new experience in a familiar space for those folks that are out interacting and supporting the arts.
And I think we found homes for many of the baby spider plants.
Awesome. Excellent.
We've been telling a lot of people that come back the last week and you can take one home and then you can keep a memento of this installation.
For sure. Thank you.
And the paradise, we're going to keep one too. We're going to see
Well,
how
of course, right?
long we can keep it, because we do have a few other plants that we that have a home at the paradise.
And there were, at the gallery opening, there were some high school seniors from Shattuck who came down, and they said, well, I don't know if I'll be able to get back at the end. Will you get a plant for me? I was like, I will try. But
Yeah, you gotta take
Shelley-
orders.
Exactly. But you know, it's interesting because when you were talking about your technique on doing this type of piece, and really the optical illusion in my head, I was thinking about that you did all these paper cuttings. So they look so three-dimensional that I thought that that's what it was. I thought that you had cut out the white parts. And so when you were talking about it, I was like, oh my gosh, so that's actually not cut out. That is actually all flat. So now I'm like, well, I have to go look at those again because like I thought I knew what I was looking at, but clearly I did not. So that
I like that because I do also make cut paper work. I'm actually working on quite a bit of it right now. So it's kind of a, I wouldn't say an intentional trick, but I do like to make people who know me and my work like really have to work for it.
Yeah,
Really
right.
look at things.
Yeah,
Like,
it's
what
like
did
your
you do
brain
at this
thinks it
time?
knows what you're seeing and it makes a decision about what you're seeing. And then that's what it, that's what it goes with until it's challenged. Your
Mhm.
thought process is challenged a little bit. So that was interesting to hear you talk about your technique for doing that.
Cool. Thanks, Tammy.
And actually, are you selling any of those, like the spider plant, the black cutouts you were talking
I mean,
about?
I don't have a price on them specifically. I have a flat price put on the installation because you got to put some number on it. So
Right.
whatever. But it's always up for negotiation. Yeah, like I mentioned, these are pieces I've sat with for quite a while, and I'm more than ready to free up space in my studio. It's limited, so.
And I'll tell you, I know like from doing cut paper pieces in the past that is so, it's just so time consuming and your little finger starts to hurt after a while from pressing down on the X-Acto.
Yep, definitely.
So yeah, when I was looking at you putting up those big cut paper pieces of the spider plants, I thought, oh good God, that's a lot of work.
Luckily, those were cut long enough ago that I guess the literal pain of making them is far enough in the past that I sit more with the positive outcome of them.
They're beautiful.
But yeah, that's why that black scrap does end up as a collage element a lot, because I've always been a pen drawer. I just picked it up and really liked it. I was always a drawer as a kid, but pen became very specific pretty early on in like my early teenage years or even preteen, I don't know. But anyway, so that like black line and sharp quality has always been there. And it's a nice fit, but yeah, you have all those scraps when you do all that really tedious cut work. And if it's not a terrible cut and something that I know I could maybe rework later, it's become kind of an ongoing nice stock for myself that I don't always have to start from scratch. I don't have to waste a full sheet of paper, nor do I have to start from square one every time I want to use those elements. So it's really helped be an ongoing thing.
I can see that.
And the piece on the screen right now really does combine that cut paperwork with the other work for me.
Yeah, these works show really well together.
Yeah. Well, awesome. And again, come and see the work in person if you can. And if you can't make it during our open hours, give us a call, give us an email, and we will get you in there when we're closed. And like Shelley said, it's negotiable. So if you see a piece of the installation, we can reach out to Shelley and see if we can make that work.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you.
Thank you. Awesome.
Thanks
So
for doing
exciting.
that, Julie.
Yeah, this is so exciting. I mean, these exhibits right now, you have to come and see them if you can. And the last one we have here is Bethlehem Academy. Bethlehem Academy is our local Catholic school here in Faribault. Their teacher is Jason Hillesheim. Jason is very inspirational. He reminds me of my high school art teacher. We have 9 students. We have Tyler, Lucy, Zachary, Maya, Sydney, Brooklyn, Izzy, Summer, and Joey. In this slide, we can see Summer's work, Zachary's work, and I can't read the little labels, but and Tammy, didn't you say one of these Summer's work is going to represent the Straight River Art Festival?
Yeah, so I'm excited to use Summer's work, which is the second from the left, the colorful image of the viaduct. So we're going to be using that on the Straight River Art Festival's poster and postcards. So she was kind enough to allow us to use that on that marketing material. So it's going to be really fun to have, you know, a local up and coming artist have her work on our local festival.
And that's in May?
It's May, yeah. The Straight River Art Festival has a Facebook page, and I believe the date is May 20th, but I would not, I'm not putting a price on that. So
Okay.
you have to check on the Facebook page because I can't remember off the top of my head.
Well, wonderful. Yeah, check that out. It premiered last year. In 2023 will be the second year for that festival. And
Yeah.
again, I'm sorry, there's glass on these pieces and you can see the reflection. Again, if you can come and see them in person, please do. This one is Tyler's work. This is a giant eyeball, and I think it follows you when you walk by it. And it's by the elevator, and it can see the whole lobby. This one, at first, I wasn't sure what type of work this is, but it is photography. And I really love this composition with these colors. And this image is from right downtown Faribault. You can kind of see it looks like it's maybe end of spring because it looks like some melting snow. And this is Zachary Vlichek. This one I would love to talk to the artist about. This, of course, is the Mona Lisa with her face missing, which is very interesting. This is Lucy Cunningham. And this one's got multiple faces for the one head, which is fascinating. Looks like graphite and some colored pencil. And here we have a printmaking by Brooklyn. It looks like kind of a sheepish little turtle. It looks like an edition of 5 prints. And we want to thank, of course, the Minnesota State Arts Board. These activities are made possible by the voters of Minnesota through a grant from the Minnesota State Arts Board, thanks to the legislative appropriation from the Arts and Cultural Fund. The Paradise Center for the Arts and a lot of organizations would not be made possible without the Minnesota State Arts Board and the voters in the state of Minnesota. And the Minnesota State Arts Board also helps and funds the regional arts councils. And the Paradise is part of the Southeastern Minnesota Arts Council. And I think Shelley is in a different region than us. There's 11 regions in total in Minnesota. And if you're an artist, there are grant opportunities out there for individual artists through the regional art councils and through the Minnesota State Arts Board. So check those out. And here is our information at the Paradise, our phone number, my email, and our website. We are recording this, and we'll be posting it on our website and social media and YouTube page. So you can share it with others that couldn't be here. And again, if you can't make it to the Paradise during open hours, please give us a call or an email, and we will get you in. These shows are up through November 12th. They do come down, I think on the 12th as Shelley's taking hers down.
Yep.
So get there in time. The Paradise current hours are Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, noon to 5, Saturday, 10 a.m. to 2. And of course, the galleries will be open prior to shows. And during the intermission, we do close the galleries after intermission. So lots of great opportunities to see the work. Anybody have questions? I know sometimes we've talked back and forth. Sometimes the artists have questions for each other. Okay, well, wonderful. Thank you, everybody. We're going to call it a night, and I will get this posted to our social media, YouTube and website tomorrow.
Great. Thanks,
Awesome.
everybody.
Thank you, guys. Have a great evening.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.